Um, so, so yeah, you can turn in, if something's really difficult is going on, just let me know and you can turn in homework through April 30th. Um, and even then, I mean, it's just a question of can I keep up with the load of backlog of stuff that may be coming in late. The other thing is there's other options too. If it's just becoming like insurmountable, if you're like behind and you can't keep up. One option is to take an incomplete. You need half the work of the course has to be done for that to count for you, to be a viable option. And then you would get, for an incomplete, you have to like complete a contract with the professor or the teacher, and then um, and then agree on a deadline to turn in your work. So that would be like, it's usually within a semester, so sometime by fall semester. And then you get that graded, and then you get the letter grade after you get your work completed. So, but you have to have half of your work done. And that would mean like if you're on the borderline, you just want to like think through like what if I only have a certain amount of time to get work done for this semester, what kind of assignments would get me over that 50%. So definitely like things like a participation grade would give you more, you would advance more. So like responding to the discussion questions, they don't take that long. Responding to people's country projects and doing that. And the participation grades, it's kind of more boost to your grade than say an ordinary take-home assignment. Or if you have a presentation still that you have to do and you're thinking, I can't get the semester done and I need to take an incomplete, getting your presentation done would be a good move because that's an important part of your grade too, as opposed to like a weekly homework assignment. So just kind of bear that in mind and let me know, talk to me individually or send me an email about if that sounds like something you might have to do. The other thing that's possible is to take a credit, a pass-fail option. And a pass is basically just giving you the credit for the course without the course contributing to your GPA. So you get the credits, but you don't get the grade, a numerical grade that affects your GPA. So that kind of decision should be based on, so basically, you could get to, as long as it's a passing grade. I'm not sure if it's a 70% or 65%. So you could have a bunch of things missing and still get a pass. The only thing is though, like, do you need the letter grade for this course to count for something? And I don't know, this is a gen ed course, so I don't know a lot about how gen ed courses count in the overall scheming, the scheme. Usually you need for a major or something like I'm an X and I need my courses in my major to count, with the letter grade, but I'm not sure. So that's another possibility. That was the pass-fail option. So ideally, just keep up. Most of you are doing great, and you're doing fine. And basically, the way I grade most papers is like just do your best to follow the instructions and fulfill them to completely, and you're good. It's not like as long as you didn't leave that. I asked you to do this, 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 and the instructions. As long as you didn't leave anything out, you get full credit for it. So there's an A. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. And I just wanted to tell you too, I started to talk about this grading options and I realized I should be recording that part because we're missing just a few people. So I started recording and I'm starting now. We're continuing to record. So, okay. So I wanted to kind of get to our topics for this week. And before I do that though, does anybody please raise your hand on your screen or whatever if you have any questions about anything I just said about finishing the semester or anything. You can see we got 11 people listening, but is there anything you want to like ask now and in this forum now? So raise your hand, give you a second or two. You should raise your hand though. I see someone's got a green checkbox, but if you want to raise your hand, okay, there we go. Dario, you are on the air, sir. So I will lower the hand and unmute. Oops, wait a minute. Hang on. Where'd you go, Dario?
I'm right here.
Okay. So, yes, sir.
So my question is simple. You know how you give, like you tell us, like we can do pass or fail
Yeah.
option. So is that, I just wanted to know, like, because is that something like you will advise for some of us in the class, or is
No,
that?
no. So you should look at your grades in Canvas. And I realize I'm a little bit behind, but kind of plan out. It gives you an estimate of what your grade is now with what's been graded.
Yeah.
And bear in mind what I said, like as long as you get your homework done and do a, honest or, thorough, complete job at getting it done, you're going to get credit for your homework. Okay. So think through though, if, kind of what your grade looks like it's going to be. And if you're afraid that your grade GPA is going to be taking a hit this semester because of this course or anything that might be missing, then you could consider a pass fail and just let me know if that's what you're thinking. But I wouldn't come to you and tell you to do it. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
My hell got it.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Anybody else want to ask a question about that stuff? Okay. All right, folks. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen and let me see here. I'm gonna mute all you guys for now, but you can unmute yourself. So all right, I just muted to keep the background noise down. All right, share screen. I'm sharing. Ta-da, okay. So here's our work for this week. So let me clean this up a little bit here. Get rid of those. Get rid of that. Okay, make this a little bit bigger. Oops. Okay. So so for this week, Nasir and Dario have their country presentations. They're going to be bringing in on Monday. Meanwhile, for this week, Olivia and Fee should have their country presentations lined up and turned in. And today, being Wednesday, before the end of the day, I'll go in and give them credit for their presentation and then post them as a discussion. So you guys, the rest of the class, have to respond for the discussion by next Monday, the 13th. And that will be your participation grade. And that's a good grade booster. Just say something intelligent, thoughtful, and ta-da, there you go. There's your participation grade for this week or for next week. This is our reading assignment. Just gonna do the next chapter in Shin. So that's this book, or if you have the electronic version, oops, I gotta move it over. It's on my other screen. Here it is. Shin, Man, give me the cover. This is, there we go. Bilingualism in Society. Okay, so, and I wanted to show you a couple things that are, let's just go over what's in here and show you a couple things, topics to talk about. And so we're going to talk about it down here, but let me continue going over the homework assignment a little bit. I'll tell you, like, I kind of read ahead and got into this chapter to make up the homework assignment. And like, I think you have to, if you're not like in the teaching field or planning to go into the teaching field, it might be a little bit dry to be reading it and be like, okay, so why is this so important? And so what I wanted to do is to sort of give you an assignment that makes you think about how or why what they're talking about is important for bilingualism and especially supporting kids who are coming into schools from immigrant families who have a minority language spoken at home, or a language that is minority in the context of United States society. And to kind of really think about how these social factors, like we've talked about different kinds of capital, economic capital, and which is the wealth you have with you, or your access to financial power, or money as to enable you to do things and protect yourself, and financial capital. So that's, and then there's cultural capital, like the way you behave and the way you talk and the way you look and the way you do things is considered to be the cool or the best or the most prestigious way to do things. And then social capital, like who you know and who you're connected to, and so on. So, so think about that in terms of these different kinds of bilingual education. So we'll talk about more about that, but this is, the author throws out a bunch of terms that some of them are overlapping, and some of them, it could get confusing if you're not really keeping scorecard of like how this information is being organized. I mean, the concepts aren't confusing or difficult, but there could be some overlap. So, so first, these are the terms I'd like you to just come up with a brief definition that are mentioned. There's other terms in there, but these are different kinds of bilingual education programs that she's discussing. And you'll see as she's discussing them that they have to do with really the position in society that the two groups are, like the people who are learning the language, and then the people, so the people who are learning the language, what are they coming from? What language and social group are they coming from as their home language and social group? And then the language that they're learning, like who are those people? And what kind of status or so on do they have? So there's that. And then the other piece that separates these two, or these four different groups, is how the educational program is actually structured. So, the way the program works is then layered on top of who these different social groups are. Who are these language learners, and who are the people that speak this language that's being learned? That's kind of on top of that is the way the program is structured. So, so you're going to think about goals, like as you define them, the goals, like what are these different kinds of bilingual education designed to do? What are they trying to achieve? And then the means is like, how do they think they're going to do it? Or what's that educational plan? So that's what I kind of want you to keep track of. First, do these sort of terms, and then they describe bilingual education programs in Canada, Europe, and US. Okay. So after you describe the terms, then just write a maybe page worth that describes how Canadian, European, and US bilingual education programs compare in their success at building and maintaining bilingualism among their students. And comment on the extent to which social attitudes and perceptions of the speakers of the two languages being used in the classroom may affect these outcomes. Okay, so that's kind of what I'd like you to think about. And like I said, just make your best honest attempt, getting what you can out of the reading. I want to add, before we started, I found an interesting video on YouTube about translanguaging that's about 15 minutes long. And I want to encourage you to watch it. You don't have to, but it does kind of explain how the language that a kid experiences in the classroom has an emotional impact on their learning, and that emotions are not just this thing that, that are a nice accompaniment, to whether you have a good classroom experience or not, but it's actually like affects your learning. So, so I'm going to add that here. I'll put the URL there. It's about translanguaging. So, okay, so what I want to do to get started is have you guys try our breakout groups. And I think that pretty much everybody in our class has at least been in a language classroom or has had some attempt to learn another language. Either maybe maybe you came from an immigrant family and there was another language spoken at home than the one in the classroom, so you're dealing with two languages in that setting. Other people maybe came from English language home, but then like studied another language in school or something like that. So I think all of us have at least been presented with the concept of like learning another language or having to work with more than one language in a school. So what I want you to do is to think about how much you know about that language that you learned, whatever you would think of as your additional language. And however far you got, whether the additional language is English or the additional language is, did I do that? No. Hey, I don't know what that is. Whether the additional language is English or another language, Spanish, French, whatever. Just think about how far you got and think about whether it was a success, whether you think that was a good experience or not, like a successful experience or not. Think about what helped or could have helped you build your proficiency in that language. So think about like what your experience was, how far did you get, was it successful? And then to the extent it was successful, like what you think helped it be successful? And if it wasn't successful, if you wished it could, or you think it could have done better if they'd done things differently, what would have made it more successful? So we're kind of just thinking on our own experiences, like what makes a good, successful language learning experience? Because then we'll take that and then talk about some of these programs that are in the reading. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I've given you your thoughts, so generate a few thoughts here. And I'm going to set up our rooms. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 11 people. So I'm going to set up 5 rooms. And then one group will get 3, and then the others will just be in pairs, okay? So think about that, and then this works as one of each group have something to share with the rest of the class virtually. So so let's see. I'm going to set up breakup rooms, and we're going to divide. Oh, I got 10 participants, so we're going to do 5 rooms, and it's going to be random. So you're just going to get who you get. You have to introduce yourself if you're not sure your other person's name or whatever. If you haven't talked to that person very much, so I'm going to create breakup rooms now, and then you have, I'll give you 5 minutes, okay? Breakup rooms being created now.
We're back. Yes, yes.
Make you attack.
Shout your channel.
You're all back.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
You're in the middle because you're in the middle of the picture too.
Yeah, yeah. You see.
Oh, we lost a couple people. It looks like.
Where?
Dang.
I think Olivia left. Oh my goodness.
Give them a 0.
Yeah, suspend her. Kick her out.
No.
Oh,
No.
where did they go? See, everybody's still here except for
We
Oh.
lost two. I can't
Starling.
remember who the people we
But they
lost.
both left.
Oh,
They both was in it together.
oh, there's Taryn. She's back.
Taryn.
And Olivia's back too. Okay.
Where? Oh,
All right. Yay. Good to have everyone back.
Olivia. Hey.
Yeah, I was
I've
having
been here.
I was having trouble, but I figured it out, so it's okay.
You guys are the best. You're sticking with it, doing all you can to stay connected.
Yes.
We
need
love
to stay
you.
connected.
Love you all for staying connected here. So,
Yes.
all right. So just so we're not talking on top of each other, and it looks like whoever it is it Dario? Like, still needs to change his fire alarm battery.
Yeah, Dario fire alarm is just wicked.
It's making that
Keep making that
beeping
beeping
noise
noise.
every 30
Exposed.
seconds.
Exposed.
You need to get yourself a 9-volt battery.
Dario don't know what he's doing. He don't know how to change. Like, I mean, we came to his house being Nasir and came
Hold
to his
up.
house the other day.
That's not me.
Somebody's
you.
got to change the battery in their fire alarm.
Look, I know it's not me.
He's not a technician.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is like an electronic who farted, not me. The other thing, you guys, I swear somebody just tried to Zoom bomb our session because someone tried to add in and it just said guest and it had a phone number on it. Like, I don't think anybody
Somebody tried to add somebody.
Oh no.
No,
my
Professor, I
God.
think that was me because it disconnected me, so I went through my phone. But you kicked me out.
Oh.
I think it was because you didn't recognize.
Oh,
So I had to redo it.
It just
She
Oh,
lying.
dang.
She lying.
it just said,
Get it out here.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. Because it just said a phone number and then it said guest, and I thought, ooh, are we gonna get Zoom bombed?
Somebody go join the
Bail out.
All right. Well, that's good.
man.
Okay, so wow, it's 12:35. Okay, let's so I'm gonna just let's see. I gotta figure out how to do this here. Yeah, I'm gonna mute all for now, and then like, could we have someone just tell us like what like contributing to this conversation? What would you say about what makes good language? What makes it for a good, productive classroom language experience? So if you could find your raise your hand thing, and then we'll just go one at a time. Okay, we got Ernest and Dario first. So, all right, okay, so Dario, you can go. You are on the air.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Palto. It is an honor.
Yes, and please tell us where you're calling from.
I'm coming live from the house of 1417 in Philadelphia. But
Oh, wow, yeah, okay. Well, go ahead, you're on the air.
all right, so one thing for sure that I think that's really like mandatory in order for a language to be properly retained in the classroom is mostly practice. Not only inside the class but outside, because like there's no way you go like someone going like to remember everything in class.
Yeah.
And the way we use language and we learn language and stuff is totally different to
Yeah.
the reality. I think that's where like my Spanish class failed, because I loved learning Spanish in high school, but I would only use it to make fun with my friends. So I fun with my friends outside the classroom, but I never actually speak or held a new conversation
Wow.
conversation. And
So when
I
you
still
say
remember
practice,
some words.
when you say practice, for a lot of people, that means like
Is my internet okay?
Yeah, that's good. I don't know. I think I just got choppy. I don't know if you guys, you have to like just put your hand up if I suddenly get really bad and you can't hear me. So yeah, I agree with you about like, I think that's a really good point about practice, especially inside and outside of class. I think what practice means a lot of different things to different people. So you got to think about like, if you're a teacher,
Yeah.
you know, what kind of practice is the kind of practice that you look for. And, you know,
More like asking if you can find people that speak the language.
yeah.
y- y-
Yeah, yeah. So you're talking about actually interacting with real
Yeah.
people, not filling in sentences with the right form of the verb necessarily. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Dario. We'll go to the next room. And Ernest,
Yeah, yep. At
you
least-
are up. You are on the air, Ernest.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
So where are you calling from, Ernest?
Calling from the 215, from the best room in the house.
Yeah, the house.
He lying.
You're rocking the house. Okay, so what are your thoughts on?
I think so. To answer the question, will help me a lot to learn Spanish throughout my years of high school and through college. Just doing a lot of activities and doing a lot of you know, how the teacher doesn't she makes like how in class, you know, when you come into the classroom settings you have to speak Spanish. That helped me a lot because like Dario was saying, like you practicing it, and like my coach said back in the day, he said perfect practice make perfect. So once you get to perfect it, you know, you be able to, you know, at least speak the language more fluently than you did before, and you can see the progress in yourself, and you know, that's what helped me a lot too.
So when you said activities, is that like, did your teacher use Spanish most of the time in the class?
Yeah, we speak like we would play games and activities in Spanish.
Wow.
Like Kahoot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. The famous Kahoot. Yes. And that's interesting because, like I said, I think in a lot of language classrooms that are not designed for, you know, English for immigrants.
Yeah.
So if it's like a foreign language, or considered, you know, or a minority language like Spanish or whatever in the US, it's sort of like, well, gee, should we immerse them or not? And there's like a debate over whether teachers really, if you speak mostly in the language, aren't the kids going to be overwhelmed and so on? But then when you look at English classes for immigrants, a lot of times it's like, well, yeah, no question, immerse them. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, it's just like hard immersion. Like, we don't even care if you know, have any, we're not going to adjust English. You just go straight into class with everybody else and sink or swim, you know? So that's kind of interesting, you know, like what would make an educator think that too bad on these kids, just make them sink or swim, for one kind of learners. And then for another kind of learners, like, oh, no, we can't do immersion in Spanish because that's going to be too hard. You know, it's great that you had a teacher who was actually like, no, we're going to like make this an accessible immersion in Spanish. We're going to play games. We're going to, you know, speak more simply, make it so the kids can access it. But a lot of people who teach foreign languages are afraid of doing that because they think that, you know, everyone's going to get lost or whatever. So, but they're not worried about kids getting lost when it comes to like learning English because you're an immigrant. Just freaking get with the program. You know? So, okay, we have Dario has another comment, but there's a lot of you who are kind of sitting and listening. Does anybody want to say something? You have to, okay, see, Nasir, do you want to say something? I'm also looking at raising your hand on this little like sideboard here, but I can see you're actually physically raising your hand. So Nasir, we'll let you go. And then Olivia, you can go after Nasir. So
yes.
Go ahead.
I would like to agree to what Ernest was saying of how, like, you know, we've all learned Spanish, because in high school I took Spanish as a second language, and basically we did Kahoot, but we also did Duolingo. It was like this website. If you ever heard of Duolingo.
Yeah, it's a lot of vocabulary games, as far as I can tell, and translation. It's a lot of translation games and vocabulary games.
Yeah. We use that, but we mainly play Kahoot. So
That's
and we
like a
had like
voting. It's just like the teacher designs questions and then you all vote, right?
yeah. That's basically what it is. And we had like like vocab tests and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But
Yeah.
that's basically how I learned Spanish in high school throughout the like 4 years that I was there.
Did your teacher speak in Spanish in class, or was it in English and then you just
Um,
use Spanish to do these different games?
she would kind of do it. She would kind of use a little code switching and language shifting to do that. Like she would go in and out. Like she'll speak Spanish and then go back to English. Like it was going in and out so she can like teach us.
Right, right. Okay. Oh, that's cool. All right. So, and I think that, like what else, I do research and teaching on how to prepare language teachers too. And we're kind of talking about what we try to recommend for language teachers is to create a sort of supportive immersion environment where you're speaking even from day one in the language that you want kids to learn, but it's adapted. It's not like just let the floodwaters in and the kids would feel overwhelmed, that you really have to train people to simplify how they talk to students, and you keep it immersion, but it's like baby Spanish for the beginning learners, and you kind of scale it up as the learners develop and stuff. So okay, let's thank you, Nasir, and let's go to Olivia. You are on the air. What would you, Olivia? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. So I was just saying, like, I know in my middle school, Spanish was like not really taught that seriously, and it wasn't really taken seriously, especially by my teachers. But when I got to high school, I think it got much better. Like we had different levels of Spanish, which was helpful. And in order to like get into a certain class, you would have to take like a test, like placement tests. And like I was telling Starlin, I was in like AP Spanish, and that was completely like, I kind of felt like I was in like a country where I was like only speaking Spanish, because my teacher was really strict. Like the moment you walked in the door, you couldn't speak English anymore. So I found that to be like, it was super immersive. So I found that to be like really helpful. And everyone in my class, like even if they've never like heard Spanish like before, like they were pretty good speakers. So I think it's like necessary to have different levels, because not every student is going to be on the same level when learning a foreign language. So I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, so that kind of goes with what Dario and Ernesta were saying, from the beginning. Like it's about practice, and it's about the kind of activities you do. And so, it's not just a question of like turning on a faucet of immersion. It's like, okay, so the water's coming out of the faucet. What are we using that water for? Because you use language to do things. So you got to think, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you're using the language that kids will be learning. But then like, so what am I using it for though?
Right.
And so if you're like in a classroom where you're actually learning about the language learner, the culture and the people, and you're learning how to express yourself and, exchange meaning with other people in class and so on, that's the kind of activity that you're looking for, is to use it to express yourself, build social relationships, kind of be a new person, maybe be yourself, but in a new language, not just sort of slot in verbs and push buttons to say this answer, that answer. It really matters kind of how you design the activities. So
yeah, I agree. Like we had full-on presentations, like PowerPoint presentations that we had to give. So things like that, I feel like really kind of get you to speak. And kind of create full sentences instead of just using like, verbs or saying like very basic sentences.
Right. So cool. Okay. Would anybody else like to share an idea or thought? You did hand back there. I just wanted to get a couple other first-time people in first. Did you have another thing you want to add, Sir, Mr. Saint-Fleur?
Yeah, D.
Wait. Am I allowed to talk now?
You can, yes, but well, you had your hand up, and I just wanted to let other people who hadn't talked yet. But go ahead.
To be honest, I think I forgot what I was supposed to say. I
Oh,
want to
all right,
practice
okay.
my
Skip him,
Spanish.
skip him.
What I wanted to
Okay.
say, like, hola,
All right.
mi nombre Dario, soy de la sala de mi casa. I have no idea what I'm
What you
saying.
talking about, man?
Ernest is like giving you a go faster.
I'm giving a crash course.
Move along, sir. Move along. All right. Let me go back to
Yes.
screen sharing, and I want to just that was a cool discussion. I'm glad it worked. So thanks
Yeah.
everybody for participating in that. Let me go back to screen sharing and just go back to what the readings are, and that we have about. We'll end on time here.
1:30.
Yeah, it's
I have no idea what you want, bro.
10 to 1 here. Okay, so
2 o'clock.
So this is. So we're looking at like, what does education for additive bilingualism look like? So additive bilingualism means that as you learn a new language, you're adding it to what you can do, and you're not subtracting your original language. So, you know, you could say like, well, what do you mean subtracting my original language? And what we're talking about, subtracting your original language, is what would happen if you, especially in the context of immigration or people who speak they call it minoritized language, a language that is made to be a minority language through conquest or whatever. So American Indians and, you know, people who've been dominated by another culture. When people who are in groups that don't have power or prestige, or have less power and prestige in society, when they are made to learn the language of the people who do have power and prestige, oftentimes what happens is that they you know, lose their original language. So that's what we're kind of looking at. Oftentimes when immigrants come to the United States, they're put in second language, English as a second language programs that are designed to just get them to learn English, and then whatever about your home language. If you can keep it up on your own, fine, but we're not going to support it. And you know, that sort of sense of illegitimacy that goes with who you are and what you're coming with has an impact on learning outcomes, and has an impact on you know, how kids do in school. So, you know, it's an implied denigration of the person that is not just like, oh, it's not just an emotional thing, like, oh, you made me feel bad about myself. It's that sense of being less than is carried all throughout their school experience. And then, you know, that affects what they think of as their possibilities for belonging and being successful and so on. So it's like you either just shift all the way to English and forget about your family and everybody else, and then you'll succeed, or stick with your, you know, family language or whatever, and then you'll kind of be stuck in the margins. I mean, that's kind of a choice sometimes that is implicitly presented by complete immersion programs in English for migrants. So here's what the examples that they're talking about. There's a weak form of bilingual education, which is this subtractive approach, where we're like providing instruction in 2 languages, the home language and then the majority language. But we're only going to do that for a little while just to get you adjusted, and then we're going to like leave the minority language or the home language aside. Not in, you know, we're not going to involve that in school at all. So that's called transitional bilingual education. And strong form is an additive approach where you're learning another language, but it's not you to lose or encouraging you to lose or forget your family language. So there's different kinds, and that's what the focus of this chapter is about different structures to the program. An enrichment approach, a maintenance approach, and then this two-way immersion approach. So enrichment is, and really the differences between them are just like, well, who are the speakers of, who are these learners of language, and then versus who are the speakers of the language that's being learned. So like in an enrichment approach, the learners are speaking a safe language. Like they already have prestige and they want to add another language to what they know. So you know, that would be like if you speak English in the United States and there's no, there's not going to be a risk that you won't be able to relate to your family or the people you care about by studying another language. Okay, so but you study this other language and you're in a bilingual program that's going to add on to what you already have. So that's what they mean by enrichment. And the examples in Canada and Europe down here are enrichment examples, because you have English speakers in Canada and people from Europe who are already speak the majority language in their countries. They're trying to learn another language and they have an immersion program for them. So in Canada, the English speakers are learning French. They're adding that to what they have. In Europe, it's a variety of different countries. They're either going to learn English or French or German or some other language that gives them more access to cultural capital and economic capital. Okay. These maintenance bilingual education and two-way immersion are kinds of additive bilingual education that are designed to support people who speak a minority language and also give them skills in the majority language. So there's examples from the US and New Zealand where you're talking about either indigenous languages, Native American languages, or immigrant languages being taught continuously through the children's elementary school program, as they also learn English on top of that. But you don't pull them out of their family language education after 1 or 2 years. You keep it going, throughout their elementary school years. So they get a really good literacy and grounding and learning concepts in those languages. And then they're also learning English. So that's maintenance. And then two-way immersion is when you bring into the mix people who are speaking, who are like enrichment kids. Like, so English speakers who maybe want to learn some Spanish, or in New Zealand, some Maori, the indigenous language there. So you're giving both the heritage learners or the minority speakers a chance to keep their language and learn English. And then you're also giving people who already speak English a chance to learn another language as well, which is the heritage language of these other kids. So Taryn, I see you have your hand. So would you like to say something, Taryn?
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have another class.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, I see. We're moving on. That's totally fine. Yep. If you need to go, I'm just about done anyway. We're gonna move along here. So that's kind of all I really wanted to say. So that's where we're going. And yeah, if you do need to unplug here, feel free to just.
Taryn,
Taryn, don't leave.
Taryn, it won't keep the without you. It really won't. But somehow we'll try to manage to get on and keep a good class.
Don't leave.
Oh.
All right. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's really kind of it.
Oh man.
So, anybody have any comments? You want?
Oh.
I have a comment.
Okay, Nasir, go ahead. Go ahead, Nasir.
Can we stay till 2:30?
No.
Yes.
Are you feeling lonely there, Nasir?
Yeah, we
We
are.
need to, we need to stick together.
Also,
Stick
like,
together. Starlin, we gonna stick together.
I
Let's
have
do
no
it.
comment. Like,
Amado, Alexander, I see you laughing. Come on. We gotta stick together. Please, we need to
Seriously,
stay united.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording now because we're done with the class part. So,
wait, I think as well, like the part that like language immersion and stuff. I think parents, immigrant parents, especially like when I look at my parents, they care so much more about like learning English than to actually keep their own language when they come to America.
no,
And
no.
it's like I don't know. Some of
Oh,
them, I'd be like,
No,
what?
but that makes total sense, Dario, because and that's what they said in the book too. Is like, you know, most immigrants just want, if they've moved to a new country, it's because they, you know, want a better life for themselves and their kids. You know, they want to, they want things to go well and to give their kids a good launch into life. You know, so yeah, I mean, so they understand or they believe that you got to get English, or you got to have the majority language down to do well. But what that reflects though is not understanding that you can do both, and you actually could come out ahead by creating allowing your kids to be bilingual and biliterate. You know. And that's because society's just sending the message that you just got to get with get with English. It's the language of prestige and power, and
Yep.
if there, you know, this fear that if you don't go all in on English, then they're not going to get it, and that's just the research doesn't support that. But a lot of society believes that, you know, and of course parents are going to be like, I'm so afraid my kid won't fit in and belong, you know, so. Yeah, that makes total sense. But the message isn't out there that you don't have to do that. It's kind of a false choice. That's why they call English a killer language, because it's so successful. You don't have to like make an effort to learn English in America or a majority English-speaking country. It's going to happen.
That's what I'm gonna learn Spanish.
Yeah, and so what we're saying is like the best model for education is half and half. Because you could be teaching the concepts in the home language, so you don't have the language barrier to understanding the concept, and then it transfers easily. If you know, then the next day, suppose you're 50%, or you're doing one day in Spanish or whatever, and then another day in English. Then that next day you're kind of building on those same concepts, but in another language. I mean, that's just like, imagine the skill set you could be giving those kids. If you're teaching the same concepts in two languages, and then they build on each other, you know, and the kids will figure it out. And this is such an English dominant society, you don't have to worry about the kids not getting English. So
that was the concept. Yeah.
But see, I think too that part of it is like shame about your own language. Like, you don't even want yourself to stick out. You think like, if I speak this language, it marks me as some marginalized person, and I don't want to do that. You know, I want to show I'm fitting in here. So that power that impulse to just want to fit in and belong is super strong, and I don't think we always appreciate it. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, talking here.
All right, we're gonna stay.
What?